What if I told you that the very thing you're fighting, that relentless worry churning in your chest, that voice that never stops calculating the next catastrophe, is the very thing keeping you from the life you're meant to live? Right now, as you watch this, there's a part of you that's exhausted, tired of carrying the weight of 1,000 what-ifs, tired of being the person who anticipates every failure, every rejection, every moment when the world might collapse around you. You've become a prisoner of your own protective mechanisms, and the bars of this prison are made of worry itself. If this resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. By the end of this video, you'll become a different person, so stay till the end. Michel de Montaigne, the 16th century French philosopher, understood something profound about human suffering that modern psychology is only beginning to grasp. He wrote, "My life has been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened. Today, we'll journey together through the labyrinth of worry into the sanctuary of inner peace. You wake up every morning carrying an invisible weight. Before your feet even touch the floor, your mind is already 3 steps ahead, cataloging dangers that may never materialize. What will go wrong today? What if you're not enough? What if they discover you're just pretending to have it all together? This is the shadow that Carl Jung spoke of, the part of yourself you've disowned, the anxiety you've learned to carry as a badge of responsibility. You tell yourself that worry is care, that anticipating disaster is wisdom. But Jung knew better. He understood that what we resist in ourselves becomes our master. Your worry isn't protecting you, it's consuming you. Like a fire that feeds on the very house it was meant to warm, your anxiety has grown beyond its purpose. You've become so skilled at imagining catastrophe that you've forgotten how to imagine joy. So practiced at preparing for pain that you've lost the ability to receive pleasure. The ancient Stoics had a word for this, premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. But they understood something you might have forgotten. The purpose wasn't to live in fear of these evils, but to realize how little control you actually have over them and how much control you have over your response. You see, worry is not love. Worry is not wisdom. Worry is the ego's desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable, to grasp the ineffable, to cage the wind itself. And in this grasping, you've lost touch with the very thing you're trying to protect. Your peace, your joy, your authentic self. Montaigne spent his life observing this human tendency towards self-torture. He watched how we create elaborate mental prisons and then wonder why we feel trapped. We are never at home. We are always beyond, he wrote. Always projecting ourselves into an imaginary future filled with imaginary problems, never fully inhabiting the only moment we truly possess. Now, think about it. How many of your worries from last year actually came to pass? How many sleepless nights were spent solving problems that solved themselves? How much life have you missed while preparing for deaths that never came? This is the cruel mathematics of worry. It multiplies suffering by making you live through every potential disaster twice, once in imagination and once in reality, if it ever actually occurs. But here's what your worried mind doesn't want you to know. Most disasters exist only in imagination. Most suffering is phantom pain from phantom wounds. You've been living in a house of mirrors, and every reflection shows you the same distorted image of catastrophe. But what if I told you there's a door you haven't noticed? What if the way out has been there all along, hidden behind the very thing you've been most afraid to face? The possibility that you don't need to carry this weight anymore. But how did you get here? How did you learn to mistake anxiety for love, worry for wisdom? The answer lies in the invisible curriculum of your childhood, the lessons no one meant to teach, but everyone absorbed. Perhaps you learned that good people worry, that caring means carrying the weight of everyone else's potential pain. Maybe you discovered that the worried child got attention, that anxiety was a language of love in a household that didn't know how else to express care. Nietzsche understood this conditioning all too well. He wrote about the herd morality that trains us to betray our own nature in service of social expectations. You learned to worry because worried people seemed responsible. You learned to anticipate disaster because prepared people seemed wise. You learned to carry everyone else's burdens because sacrificial people seemed good. But Nietzsche also knew that what society calls virtue is often just disguised weakness. What the world calls responsibility is often just disguised control. What everyone calls love is often just disguised fear. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to meet the expectations of others. Your worry has become your persona, the face you show the world to prove you care enough, try hard enough, are responsible enough to deserve love. But beneath this mask, your authentic self is suffocating. You've been playing a role so long, you've forgotten it's a costume. The worried one, the responsible one, the one who thinks of everything. This persona has served you. It's gotten you praise, made you seem indispensable, given you a sense of identity. But it's also become your prison. Machiavelli, often misunderstood as purely cynical, actually understood something profound about human nature. We become what we practice. You've practiced worry so long it's become your default state. You've rehearsed catastrophe so often it feels more real than peace. You've trained your nervous system to live in a perpetual state of emergency, and now it doesn't know how to rest. But here's the liberation that philosophy offers. What was learned can be unlearned. What was conditioned can be reconditioned. The neural pathways that lead to worry were carved by repetition, and new pathways can be carved the same way. Montaigne discovered this through his own practice of self-observation. He spent years studying himself with the curiosity of a scientist and the compassion of a friend. He learned to notice when his mind was creating problems that didn't exist, when his imagination was painting disasters in colors more vivid than life itself. This is your invitation to become your own subject of study, to observe your worry with fascination rather than judgment, to notice when your mind begins its familiar dance of disaster, and to ask yourself, is this thought serving my highest good? Is this worry protecting me, or is it preventing me from living? The conditioning runs deep, but it's not permanent. You are not doomed to carry this weight forever. The very awareness that you're reading these words, that you're questioning your relationship with worry, is proof that something in you is already awakening. Something in you remembers what peace feels like and is calling you home to yourself. The persona of the worried one has served its purpose. It kept you safe when you felt vulnerable, gave you control when you felt powerless, made you feel valuable when you felt worthless. But you're not that frightened child anymore. You're not that powerless person anymore. You don't need worry to prove your worth or love to earn your place. Now comes the most radical act of all, the conscious choice to become unavailable to worry. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending problems don't exist. This is about what Montaigne called retirement, the deliberate withdrawal from the external world's demands on your psychic energy so you can return to yourself. It's what Jung called the night sea journey, the descent into your own depths to retrieve the parts of yourself you've lost to anxiety. You must become selfish with your peace, protective of your inner sanctuary, unavailable to every emergency that isn't actually an emergency, every crisis that isn't actually your crisis, every worry that isn't actually serving your highest good. This will feel wrong at first. You've been trained to believe that availability is love, that constant vigilance is care, that carrying everyone else's fears is what good people do. But Jung knew better. Your vision becomes clear when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. The withdrawal I'm speaking of isn't physical isolation, though sometimes that's needed too. It's energetic sovereignty. It's the radical act of saying no to the voice in your head that insists you must solve every problem, prevent every disaster, carry every burden that anxiety places on your shoulders. Nietzsche wrote about the eternal return, the idea that if you had to live your exact life over and over again for eternity, would you choose it? But I ask you this, if you had to carry your exact worries over and over again for eternity, would you choose them? If your anxiety was the only song you could ever hear, would you want to keep listening? The answer that arises from your depths is liberation itself. This withdrawal is not escape, it's return. Return to the self that exists beneath the worry. Return to the peace that is your natural state. Return to the wisdom that knows the difference between preparation and obsession, between care and control, between love and anxiety. Montaigne spent years in his tower, not hiding from the world but learning to meet it from a place of inner stability rather than outer chaos. He discovered that when you stop being available to every worry, you become available to wisdom. When you stop being reactive to every fear, you become responsive to what actually matters. This is the paradox that the worried mind cannot understand. The less you worry, the more capable you become. The less you try to control everything, the more influence you actually have. The less available you are to chaos, the more present you become to peace. But this requires what Machiavelli called virtù, not virtue in the moral sense, but the strength to act according to your own inner wisdom rather than external pressures. The courage to disappoint others' expectations that you remain worried, available, perpetually concerned about everything that could possibly go wrong. You must learn to say, I am not available for this worry. I am not available for this emergency that isn't my emergency. I am not available for this story about all the ways everything could fall apart. This isn't callousness, it's clarity. This isn't selfishness, it's self-preservation. This isn't abandonment, it's coming home to yourself. In this sacred withdrawal, you'll discover something remarkable. Most of what you've been worrying about continues to resolve itself without your anxiety. Most of the disasters you've been preventing were never going to happen anyway. Most of the burdens you've been carrying weren't actually yours to carry. The world doesn't need your worry to keep spinning. Your loved ones don't need your anxiety to stay safe. Life doesn't need your constant vigilance to continue unfolding as it's meant to unfold. What the world needs, what your loved ones need, what life itself needs, is you, fully present, fully alive, fully available to what's actually happening rather than what might happen. And that person, that authentic, peaceful, present version of yourself, can only emerge when you stop feeding the worry that keeps them imprisoned. In the silence that follows your withdrawal from worry, something miraculous begins to happen. Like a spring that was blocked by debris, your natural wisdom begins to flow again. Jung called this process individuation, the journey toward becoming who you truly are beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the personas, beneath all the learned patterns of anxiety and control. But individuation isn't just psychological theory, it's alchemical transformation. It's the conversion of lead into gold, fear into wisdom, worry into presence. This is where Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch reveals its true meaning. Not some superior being who dominates others, but the person who has overcome their own inner tyrants. The voices that say you must worry to be worthy, you must suffer to be good, you must carry the weight of the world to prove your love. The Übermensch is simply the person who has learned to say, I am the author of my own experience. I choose my thoughts as carefully as I choose my actions. I am not victim to my conditioning, but creator of my becoming. When you stop worrying, something extraordinary happens. Your energy returns to you. All that life force that was being drained by imaginary catastrophes, all that creative power that was being consumed by mental rehearsals of disaster, it comes flooding back. You discover reserves of strength you forgot you had. Montaigne noticed this in himself. As he learned to observe his thoughts rather than believe them, as he practiced what he called the art of living, he found himself more capable, not less. More effective, not less. More loving, not less. But his love was clean now, free from the contamination of anxiety, free from the desperation of control. This is the paradox that transforms everything. When you stop trying to control your life through worry, you gain actual influence over your life through presence. When you stop being available to every fear, you become available to genuine intuition. When you stop reacting to imaginary problems, you develop the clarity to respond to real situations with wisdom and grace. Machiavelli understood this distinction between power and force, between influence and control. True power doesn't come from manipulating outcomes through anxiety. It comes from being so grounded in yourself that you can meet whatever arises from a place of inner stability rather than outer chaos. You begin to make decisions from wisdom rather than fear. You begin to act from love rather than worry. You begin to live from your center rather than from your circumstances. This isn't about becoming indifferent or uncaring. It's about caring so purely that your care isn't contaminated by anxiety. In this transformation, you discover that you were never actually powerless. You were just giving your power away to worry, handing your authority over to anxiety, letting fear make decisions that were always yours to make. But power, once recognized, can be reclaimed. The worried mind always asks, "What if everything goes wrong?" But the awakened mind asks, "What if I'm capable of meeting whatever comes with grace? What if my peace is stronger than any circumstance? What if the very thing I've been afraid of losing, my safety, my security, my sense of okayness, has been inside me all along?" This is the birth of inner authority. Not the authority that dominates others, but the authority that governs your own inner world. The sovereignty that says, "I decide how to interpret this experience. I choose how to respond to this moment. I determine whether this circumstance becomes a catastrophe or an opportunity for growth." Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Your worry has been unconscious, automatic, unquestioned, assumed to be protective. But now, in the light of awareness, you can see it for what it actually is, a habit that has outlived its usefulness, a protection that has become a prison, a guardian that has become a tyrant. And tyrants, once recognized, can be deposed. Now we arrive at the most subversive truth of all. To stop worrying is an act of profound rebellion against a world that profits from your anxiety. Every system around you, economic, social, even familial, has an investment in keeping you worried. Worried people are compliant people. Anxious people are manageable people. People who doubt their own inner authority are people who look to external authorities for direction, for validation, for permission to exist in peace. But Montaigne discovered something revolutionary in his Tower of Solitude. The person who is no longer available to worry becomes unavailable to manipulation. The person who has found their center cannot be controlled through fear. The person who trusts their own inner wisdom cannot be sold solutions to problems they don't actually have. This is why your healing is not just personal, it's political. Your peace is not just individual, it's revolutionary. Every person who stops worrying creates a crack in the matrix of collective anxiety that keeps humanity trapped in cycles of fear and consumption and control. Nietzsche called this amor fati, love of fate. Not passive resignation, but active embrace of what is, including the uncertainty, including the unknowability, including the beautiful, terrible mystery of being human in a world where nothing is guaranteed except change itself. When you love your fate, when you stop fighting reality with worry, you don't become passive. You become powerful in a completely different way. You become like water, which seems soft and yielding, but can carve canyons through solid rock. You become like space, which offers no resistance but contains everything. This is the sacred selfishness I'm calling you to. The fierce protection of your own peace, the radical prioritization of your own presence, the revolutionary act of being so committed to your own healing that you're no longer available to participate in the collective madness of constant worry. Jung understood that the individual who heals themselves heals the world, not through preaching or teaching or trying to fix others, but simply by becoming a living example of what's possible when a human being stops believing they need anxiety to survive. You must become selfish with your energy, protective of your attention, territorial about your peace. You must learn to say no to invitations to worry as clearly as you would say no to invitations to physical harm. You must treat your mental space as sacred territory and your emotional equilibrium as treasure to be guarded. This doesn't make you less loving. It makes your love cleaner. When you're no longer contaminating your care with worry, when you're no longer mixing your affection with anxiety, when you're no longer confusing love with fear, you become capable of a depth of presence that heals everyone it touches. Montaigne wrote, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself." This belonging is not selfishness in the small sense, it's selfishness in the cosmic sense. It's recognizing that you came into this world to express something unique, something that has never been expressed before and will never be expressed again, and worry is the static that prevents that signal from coming through clearly. When you belong to yourself, when you stop worrying, you stop being a burden to others because you stop needing them to manage your anxiety for you. You stop being controlling because you stop trying to manage your worry through controlling circumstances. You stop being needy because you stop looking to the external world to provide the safety that can only be found within. Instead, you become a sanctuary, a place where others can rest from their own worry, a reminder of what peace looks like, a living demonstration that it's possible to be fully human without being constantly afraid. This is your invitation. To become so committed to your own peace that you're willing to disappoint anyone who needs you to remain worried. So devoted to your own healing that you're willing to let go of any relationship that requires your anxiety to function. So dedicated to your own truth that you're willing to be misunderstood by anyone who mistakes worry for love. And so we return to where we began. But you are not who you were when this journey started. You began this video carrying the weight of invisible chains, believing that worry was protection, that anxiety was love, that peace was somehow irresponsible or naive. You've traveled through the shadow of your conditioning, faced the truth of your learned helplessness, and emerged into the light of your own inner authority. Montaigne's great insight was that the goal of philosophy is not to solve all problems, but to transform your relationship with them. Not to eliminate uncertainty, but to dance with it. Not to control life, but to live it so fully that control becomes irrelevant. When you stop worrying, everything starts to go well. Not because external circumstances magically improve, but because you stop interpreting neutral circumstances through the lens of catastrophe. Not because problems disappear, but because you develop the capacity to meet them from presence rather than panic. The worried mind lives in a world of emergencies. The peaceful mind lives in a world of experiences. The worried mind sees threats everywhere. The peaceful mind sees opportunities for growth. The worried mind asks, "What if everything goes wrong?" The peaceful mind asks, "What if this is exactly what I need for my evolution?" This is the transformation that awaits you, not the elimination of challenge, but the development of the capacity to meet any challenge from your center. Not the prevention of change, but the flexibility to dance with whatever changes come. Not the control of outcomes, but the mastery of your own responses. Jung's final insight was that individuation, becoming who you truly are, is not a destination, but a direction. Every day you choose whether to live from worry or from wisdom, from fear or from love, from your conditioning or from your authentic nature. Every moment you decide whether to be available to anxiety or to presence. The person who stops worrying doesn't become careless. They become careful, filled with care that is clean and pure and effective. They don't become indifferent. They become differently engaged, responsive rather than reactive, present rather than projecting. Machiavelli's virtue is revealed not as the ability to control others, but as the strength to govern yourself. Not as the power to manipulate outcomes, but as the capacity to remain centered regardless of outcomes. Not as domination over circumstances, but as sovereignty over your own inner world. This is your inheritance. The peace that surpasses understanding, the love that casts out fear, the wisdom that knows the difference between what you can control and what you must learn to dance with. This is your birthright. To live without the constant static of worry, to love without the contamination of anxiety, to care without the desperation of control. As you go forward from this moment, remember, every time you choose presence over projection, peace over panic, wisdom over worry, you're not just healing yourself, you're healing the world. You're becoming a note of sanity in the symphony of human experience. You're proving that it's possible to be fully alive without being constantly afraid. The question that began this journey was, what if the very thing you're fighting is keeping you from the life you're meant to live? Now you know the answer. The worry you thought was protecting you was preventing you from fully living. The anxiety you thought was love was keeping you from loving cleanly. The fear you thought was wisdom was blocking your access to true wisdom. But that was then. This is now. And now, you have a choice. Will you return to the familiar prison of worry, or will you step into the vast freedom of not knowing what comes next, but trusting yourself to meet it with grace? The path home to yourself is always available. The choice to stop worrying is always before you. The peace you seek has been waiting inside you all along. When you stop worrying, everything starts to go well. Not because the world changes, but because you remember who you truly are beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the fear, beneath all the learned patterns of anxiety. You are not your worry. You never were. You are the awareness that can observe worry without becoming it, the presence that can witness fear without being consumed by it, the peace that remains untouchable at the center of every storm. Come home to yourself. Come home to this moment. Come home to the truth that has been waiting for you beneath every worry you've ever carried. You are already okay. You have always been okay, and you will continue to be okay regardless of what unfolds in the mystery of tomorrow. Welcome home.